My name's Bob Stumpf. I was with the Blue Angels from the show seasons of '93 and '94. I was the flight leader, and I served in the Navy. I was commissioned in 1974 from the Naval Academy. And it was while I was there that I started getting interested in aviation. I'm not a lifelong pilot wannabe. Growing up, it never really crossed my mind, although I did see the Blue Angels when I was about 7 years old. Bob Rasmussen was on the team, Stoney Mayock. I think Zeb Knott was the flight leader. So my dad took us to this Blue Angel Air Show in 1959, and we saw the Blue Angels. I think I was 7 years old, and for the next month, that's all we could talk about, my brothers and I, of course, but then it faded. And I determined through the years that my dad also took us to visit the Naval Academy when I was quite young, and from then on, that's what I wanted to do, thinking that I wanted to drive ships. But while there, I discovered naval aviation and saw the Blue Angels for the first, as an older guy, saw the Blue Angels fly at Annapolis and got to meet those guys, and never dreaming that I would ever be one of them, but it was inspiring just from a naval aviation perspective. Also, we got to fly during summer training here in Pensacola before our junior year. And I got to ride in a T2 out of the hangar that the Blue Angels shared with VT4. So there they were, these great big, beautiful F4s all painted up and shined and gorgeous airplanes. Didn't get to see them fly that week, but they were there, and it was very, very impressive. And the T2 ride convinced me that I needed to try to get into naval aviation. So on graduation, I went to flight school and flew off of carriers for a number of years. And then at the end of my command tour, VFA 83 on the USS Saratoga, I was at sea in the Mediterranean and sent in my application for this flight leader job that was coming open, never dreaming that I would be even in the running. I got a message back saying, "Here's your ticket to Corpus Christi from Rome. We'll see you in 2 days." So they flew me back to the States, and I think Haas Pearson had a similar experience. He was on deployment as well. And we all met with the Admiral. We met with the board first, board of senior naval officers who interviewed the 6 of us, one of whom was Bob Rasmussen. And I told him that I saw him fly when I was 7 years old. He didn't think that was funny, but so I was fortunate enough to be selected and joined the team. This was the interview, I think, was in June, and I joined the team at the end of July for the European tour 1992, which was really an incredible experience. I flew the spare airplane for that tour, which was, I think, 6 weeks long. First stop was Sweden, and then we went to Finland, and we went to Moscow for a week, Bulgaria, Romania, Italy, UK, and Spain, and then back to the States. It was quite an experience. Well, when we saw the Blue Angels at Annapolis, I remember they came every year for June week, which was the graduation week back then, and they still do. They still do a show there it's in May now. But there's a reception after the show, and they show up in their civilian commitment attire, and they're like rock stars. And I was just a midshipman. My girlfriend, now my wife, was with me, and just to shake their hand and just chat with them for a moment. It was at the superintendent's house. It was very sort of formal, but these guys walked in, and it was the house, the crowd stood still. They were really impressive, and really they're trained to be able to be in that environment and to be well mannered and friendly. So it was just really impressive from that point of view. But later on, when I was a flight student here in Pensacola, I remember going to a show. It was the end of season show. Must have been in '75. I forget what year it was, but I was learning all the basics of naval aviation, one of which is how to rendezvous, how 2 airplanes come together in the sky without hitting each other. It's to join up in formation. It's very difficult for someone it's a difficult maneuver to learn, but it's very basic. You have to know that maneuver. So you do tens and 20, 100 of them and another 100 until you finally are able to do it, sort of without thinking. Well, I'm in the middle of learning how to rendezvous in T-28s, I think, and these guys do the fleur-de-lis maneuver, which 6 airplanes come and break up in 6 different directions, and then the diamond, the 4 of them, from that maneuver, the recovery from that maneuver is they all go into a loop. And so they're all spread out and they're in this loop and they rendezvous perfectly symmetrically on their backs. And I watched that and just went, it was just surreal. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. It was almost vertigo inducing to see that happen and just go, wow, that's impossible. So yeah, it was, from then on, we knew that was pretty special to be in that organization. After you've been flying jets in the fleet for, I guess, about 15 years at that point or more, 15 years, yeah. When I got the opportunity to be considered for the team, and frankly, the only reason I applied is because my tour was ending and they were going to send me back to Washington, and I said, please don't do that. And they said, you have to go. So I figured, well, this is a way out. So went ahead, long shot, But anyway, after 15 years of flying in the fleet on and off aircraft carriers and combat and all that, you get pretty sure of yourself. You feel pretty good about your aviation abilities, your flying abilities. And so, hey, how hard can that be, So then I traveled with the team for several months at the end of that 92 season and got to see what they were doing. I was thinking to myself, am I going to be able to do this? Because it was a lot going on, especially taking rides with the formation in the two-seater and watching what's going on in the air and just on the radios, and I'm just going, wow, there's a lot going on here, especially for the boss, because he's got to keep track of all this stuff. And he's on the radio the whole time, and two different frequencies. The solos are on a separate frequency, and he's monitoring 2 different radios at the same time and keeping track of traffic and weather and everything. So we start training here in Pensacola after Thanksgiving for the following season, and everything's different. I've been flying the F-18 now for 11 years, and I know it. I've got 3,000 hours in the airplane. I know the airplane, and everything's different. The way the stick feels is different because there's pressure on the stick, forward pressure on the stick. All the commands are different. What you do with your hands is different. Your rudder pedals are all the way up into your chest almost, so you can get that rock solid position. It was having to learn to fly all over again, and it was hard. It was real hard. I struggled mightily during winter training. It was really humiliating. It was a tough road to go down, and I didn't realize how difficult it was going to be. But it's a building block approach like anything else. I mean, I never knew I'd be able to land an airplane on a ship, and we learned how to do that because the training has evolved over the years, and it's gotten really good and really standardized. And by the opening of the season, we flew a real air show that looked pretty good. Haven't been out in El Centro for a couple of months, so we flew that first air show in middle of March and went well. It was still a struggle, and I have to say that doing that for 2 years, my last air show was just as difficult as the first one. It never got easy. It never got to where you could sit back and just have fun. It was really hard work each and every time. So others that went before me and came after me, I'm sure it was easier for them, but for me, it was always a lot of work. A big challenge every time. The synergy amongst the team members is very unique, different than any other I had experienced in all the other squadrons that I'd been in. And that's because you really got to trust those guys in that formation. You got to trust them literally with your life and trust that they're going to do the right thing and trust that they're not going to hit you. And you've got to trust yourself. You've got to have a lot of self-confidence, which is difficult sometimes when you're going through some very difficult training experiences. But I think that's what really drives the team to be solidly behind each other, is that the mission is what's driving it. the mission and safety. You've got to, it looks dangerous. It's not really dangerous because we attack it from the perspective of safety first. You know, if it's not safe, we got to figure out another way to do it. And after the show or the practice, which are interchangeable, we all sit down and we go through it in excruciating detail from start to finish, and we analyze every single maneuver from every cockpit, and what do we do right, what didn't we do exactly right, and why didn't we do it right, and how are we going to get it right. And so we never flew a perfect air show while I was there. We came pretty close once, which was when we flew a show with the Thunderbirds out in Nellis Air Force Base. And somehow we got our act together, because they say it's not a competition. The heck it isn't. You know, we're in their home turf, their whole entourage is out there, you know, their whole base, it turns out, for this thing. And it's the Blues versus the Thunderbirds. It's pretty cool. And we flew a perfect air show, maybe close. I remember looking out one time out the window and at the echelon, I'm going, oh, I'd never seen them that close, you know. I mean, they were like right there, and I'm going, oh, I better not look anymore. Yeah, it was cool. And we did it in the morning, so the air was real still. Normally we fly in the late afternoon, it's real rough with all the lifties generated by the sun out there, but that was a morning air show. Air was perfectly still. It was beautiful desert. It was just gorgeous. It was a neat experience. Just to add on to that, the night before we had, or maybe it was that night, after the shows, yeah, that night we all got together for dinner at Caesar's Palace. And it was the Thunderbirds, the Blues, and the Army Golden Knights, their parachute team, were there as well. And they were invited. So we're waiting out there in that big courtyard where all the statues are at Caesar's Palace. And the Golden Knights weren't there, and we're going, they're not here yet. We're standing around talking with our counterparts from the Thunderbirds. Well, they show up in parachutes. They've come out of the sky and land in the courtyard and took off their stuff. Hey, how's it going? Yeah. Very cool.